The soft hum of fluorescent lights filled the marble lobby of Meridian Financial Tower as Emma Chen adjusted her headset for the 100th time that morning. 28 years old, with calloused fingertips hidden beneath professional manicured nails, she greeted each visitor with the same warm smile that had become her trademark over the past 3 years. Behind her pristine reception desk, a small framed photo of her late grandmother sat next to her computer monitor, the only personal touch allowed in the sterile corporate environment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma had arrived at Meridian Financial at 7 that morning, 2 hours before the official start of her shift. This early arrival wasn't mandated by her supervisor, nor was it necessary for her reception duties. Instead, Emma came early to practice piano in the empty conference room on the 32nd floor, where a black Steinway grand piano sat largely ignored except during corporate events and holiday parties. The piano had been donated by the company's founder decades ago, intended to create an atmosphere of sophistication and culture. Most employees walked past it without a second glance, treating it as expensive decoration. But for Emma, those early morning hours represented the only time she could touch the keys of an instrument worth more than her annual salary. Her fingers moved across the keys with practiced precision, playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The melody filled the empty conference room, echoing off the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bustling city below. Emma had learned this piece years ago during her time at the prestigious Whitmore Conservatory, back when her future seemed to hold concert halls and standing ovations instead of telephone transfers and appointment scheduling. The sound of elevator doors opening down the hallway caused Emma to stop mid-phrase. She quickly closed the piano lid and gathered her belongings, hurrying back to the reception desk before anyone could discover her unauthorized use of company property. By the time the first employees began filtering through the lobby, Emma was seated behind her desk with her headset on, ready to begin another day of Good Morning Meridian Financial. How may I direct your call? The morning progressed with its usual rhythm of phone calls, visitor check-ins and package deliveries. Emma handled each task with quiet efficiency, her voice never betraying the frustration that sometimes bubbled beneath her professional demeanor. She had become invisible to most people who passed through the lobby, just another piece of office equipment that helped the building function smoothly. At precisely 11:30, the elevator doors opened to reveal Charlotte Westbrook, wife of Meridian Financial's chief executive officer, Harrison Westbrook. Charlotte emerged wearing a cream-colored Chanel suit that cost more than Emma earned in 6 months, her platinum blonde hair styled in perfect waves that hadn't moved despite the windy October morning. Diamond earrings caught the lobby's recessed lighting as she approached the reception desk with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Emma had encountered Charlotte many times over the past 3 years, and each interaction followed the same pattern. Charlotte would arrive for lunch meetings with other executives' wives, treating Emma as little more than a talking directory. She never bothered to learn Emma's name, referring to her simply as Receptionist or the girl at the front desk when speaking to others within earshot. "I need to use the conference room on 32, Charlotte announced without preamble, not bothering with pleasantries. "The Ladies' Auxiliary Committee is meeting there in 20 minutes to discuss the Christmas charity auction." Emma consulted her computer screen, though she already knew the conference room's schedule by heart. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Westbrook, but that room is reserved for the quarterly board meeting this afternoon. Mr. Patterson from accounting booked it weeks ago for preparation meetings." Charlotte's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together in irritation, then moved them somewhere else. "I'm sure they can find another room for their little accounting meeting. This is for charity work, which is obviously more important." The casual dismissal in Charlotte's voice made Emma's jaw tighten, but she maintained her professional composure. "I understand the importance of your meeting, Mrs. Westbrook, but company policy requires 48 hours notice for conference room changes. The 31st floor has several smaller meeting rooms available that might work for your committee." "Smaller rooms?" Charlotte's voice rose slightly, drawing attention from several employees crossing the lobby. "Do you have any idea who I am? My husband owns this building. I don't meet in smaller rooms with my committee members." Emma felt heat rising in her cheeks but kept her voice level. "Of course, Mrs. Westbrook. I can contact Mr. Patterson's office and explain the situation. Perhaps they can relocate their meeting voluntarily." "Perhaps they can relocate," Charlotte repeated mockingly. "No, you will tell them to relocate. This isn't a request, it's an instruction. And while you're at it, make sure someone cleans that piano in the conference room. It looked dusty the last time I was up there." The mention of the piano sent a small jolt through Emma's chest. She wondered if Charlotte had somehow discovered her morning practice sessions, but the older woman's expression showed no sign of suspicion, only her usual impatience with perceived incompetence. "I'll take care of everything right away," Emma replied, reaching for her phone to contact Mr. Patterson's assistant. As Emma made the necessary calls to rearrange the board meeting preparations, Charlotte stood nearby scrolling through her phone, occasionally sighing loudly to express her displeasure with the delay. Other employees gave them a wide berth, recognizing the tension in Charlotte's posture and wanting to avoid becoming collateral damage in whatever drama was unfolding at the reception desk. 20 minutes later, the elevator opened to disgorge 5 impeccably dressed women ranging in age from their early 40s to late 60s. Emma recognized most of them as wives of other high-ranking executives from various companies throughout the city. They formed an exclusive social circle that wielded considerable influence in charity work, political fundraising, and social events that shaped the city's cultural landscape. "Charlotte, darling," called out a tall brunette woman wearing pearls that probably cost more than Emma's car. "I hope you've sorted out the venue situation. Margaret has been looking forward to presenting her auction proposals all week." "Everything's been handled," Charlotte replied with a wave of her hand, "though we did have some initial confusion about room availability. Apparently the staff here doesn't always understand priorities." Emma pretended to focus on her computer screen as the group passed by her desk, but she caught every word of their conversation. Their voices carried the casual authority of people who had never been told no, who expected the world to rearrange itself around their convenience. The women disappeared into the elevator, heading up to the 32nd floor conference room where Emma had been playing piano just hours earlier. She tried to push away the image of them sitting around the polished conference table, probably criticizing every aspect of the room's setup while planning events that would earn them social recognition for their charitable contributions. The next 2 hours passed quietly, with Emma handling routine calls and greeting afternoon visitors. She had nearly forgotten about Charlotte's committee meeting when the elevator doors opened again and the group of women emerged, their voices carrying across the lobby with animated discussion about auction items and seating arrangements. "The piano up there is absolutely gorgeous," one of the women was saying as they approached Emma's desk. "It's such a shame that it just sits there unused. Charlotte, you should organize a musical performance for the auction. Something elegant to showcase the instrument." Charlotte laughed, a sound like crystal being tapped with a spoon. "Oh please, Margaret. Where exactly would we find someone capable of playing a piano like that? It's not as if we can just pull someone off the street and expect them to do justice to a Steinway." "What about hiring a professional pianist?" suggested another woman. "Surely there are talented musicians in the city who would perform for a charity event." "Professional musicians are so expensive," Charlotte replied dismissively, "and most of them are terribly dramatic about their artistic vision. I attended a fundraiser last month where the pianist insisted on playing some dreary modern composition instead of the classics people actually want to hear. No, if we're going to have music, we need someone who understands their place and will play what's requested without any artistic pretensions." Emma's fingers tightened around her pen as she listened to Charlotte reduce professional musicians to hired entertainers expected to perform like trained animals. The casual disdain in Charlotte's voice revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of what it meant to be a serious musician, someone who had dedicated years to mastering their craft. "Well, it's not as if any of us could play it ourselves," Margaret said with a laugh.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"I haven't touched a piano since my childhood lessons ended 40 years ago. Oh, I could probably manage something simple," Charlotte said airily. "I took lessons for several years when I was young. My instructor always said I had natural talent. But a piano like that deserves something more sophisticated than my amateur efforts." The group began moving toward the lobby exit, their conversation shifting to lunch plans and afternoon shopping excursions. Emma watched them leave, noting how they seemed to float through the world without ever touching its harsher realities. Their biggest concern was finding the right musician to provide background entertainment for their charity auction, not whether they could afford groceries or rent payments. As the afternoon wore on, Emma found herself thinking about Charlotte's dismissive comments about professional musicians, the assumption that artists were simply service providers to be hired and controlled, expected to suppress their creativity in favor of playing whatever the audience demanded, reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of what art meant to those who created it. Emma's own relationship with piano had begun before she could properly reach the pedals. Her grandmother, a concert pianist who had emigrated from Taiwan in the 1960s, had recognized Emma's natural affinity for music and nurtured it with the same care she had once given to her own interrupted career. Hours spent in her grandmother's small apartment, learning scales and etudes on an old upright piano, had shaped Emma's understanding of music as something sacred, a language that could express emotions too complex for words. Her grandmother had died during Emma's second year at Whitmore Conservatory, leaving behind a small inheritance that covered Emma's remaining tuition but nothing more. After graduation, Emma had discovered the harsh reality facing most classical musicians, a field where talent alone wasn't enough to guarantee success, where connections and financial backing often mattered more than skill or dedication. She had spent 2 years auditioning for orchestras and chamber groups, taking private students and playing weekend gigs at weddings and corporate events to pay her bills. The work was inconsistent and poorly paid, forcing her to take temporary office jobs to supplement her income. When the recession hit and arts funding dried up across the country, Emma had watched opportunity after opportunity disappear. The receptionist position at Meridian Financial had been intended as a temporary solution, a stable paycheck while she continued pursuing musical opportunities on the side. But temporary had stretched into 3 years as the music industry continued to struggle and her savings dwindled. Now her grandmother's piano sat in storage because Emma's studio apartment was too small to accommodate it, another reminder of dreams deferred by practical necessity. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days 30 floors below a concert-quality piano that sat unused except for the rare corporate event. Every morning when she practiced in the empty conference room, Emma felt like she was stealing something precious, borrowing a few moments with an instrument that represented everything she had worked toward but couldn't quite reach. Her phone rang, interrupting her reverie. "Good afternoon, Meridian Financial. This is Emma speaking. How may I help you?" "Emma, this is Harrison Westbrook's office," came the crisp voice of his executive assistant. "Mr. Westbrook would like to see you in his office immediately." Emma's stomach dropped. Had someone reported her morning piano sessions? Was she about to be fired for unauthorized use of company property? She had always been careful to arrive early and leave no trace of her presence in the conference room, but perhaps security cameras had captured her activities. "Of course," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll be right up." She quickly arranged for the security guard to cover the reception desk and took the elevator to the executive floor, her heart pounding with each ascending floor number. Harrison Westbrook's corner office occupied prime real estate on the 40th floor, with panoramic windows offering views of the city skyline and the river beyond. Emma had only been in the CEO's office twice before, both times to deliver urgent messages when his assistant was unavailable. The space was designed to intimidate, with dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and walls lined with awards and photographs of Harrison with various political figures and business leaders. Harrison himself was a tall, silver-haired man in his early 60s who commanded respect through his presence rather than his voice. Unlike his wife's theatrical dramatics, Harrison possessed the quiet confidence of someone who had built his own empire through strategic thinking and calculated risks. "Emma, please sit down," Harrison said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. His tone was neutral, giving no indication of whether this meeting was disciplinary or routine. Emma perched on the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. "Thank you, Mr. Westbrook. How can I help you?" Harrison studied her for a moment before speaking. "I understand you've been very accommodating to my wife and her committee meetings. Charlotte mentioned that you helped resolve a scheduling conflict today with minimal disruption." Relief flooded through Emma's chest. This wasn't about the piano sessions after all. "Of course, Mr. Westbrook. I'm always happy to help coordinate company resources for important meetings." "Good." Harrison nodded approvingly. "That kind of flexibility and problem-solving is exactly what we value here at Meridian Financial. In fact, it's one of the reasons I wanted to speak with you today." Emma waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I've been reviewing our employee files as part of our annual assessment process," Harrison continued. "Your background is quite impressive. A degree from Whitmore Conservatory, classical piano training, some interesting experience in the arts sector before you joined us." Emma's mouth went dry. If Harrison knew about her musical background, he might also know about her unauthorized piano practice. "Yes, sir. I studied music before transitioning to administrative work." "Transitioning," Harrison repeated with a slight smile. "That's a diplomatic way to put it. I imagine the transition wasn't entirely voluntary, given the state of arts funding in recent years." "The music industry can be challenging," Emma said carefully. "This position has provided stability while I continue to pursue musical opportunities." Harrison leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "I'm curious about something, Emma. You've been with us for 3 years, consistently rated excellent on all performance reviews, never missed a day of work, never had a single complaint from staff or visitors. That level of reliability suggests someone who takes their responsibilities seriously." "I try to do my best in whatever role I'm given," Emma replied. "I'm sure you do," Harrison said, "which is why I'm confident you'll handle this next request with the same professionalism you've shown in everything else." Emma felt her stomach tighten again. "What request, Mr. Westbrook?" Harrison smiled, and for the first time since entering his office, Emma sensed warmth in his expression. "Charlotte's charity auction is next Friday evening. They've decided to include a musical performance to showcase the piano in our conference room. Charlotte has been struggling to find a suitable pianist who meets their requirements and budget constraints." Understanding began to dawn on Emma, along with a mixture of excitement and terror. "I'd like you to perform at the event," Harrison continued. "It would be a perfect solution. You have the musical background, you're familiar with the company and its culture, and you understand the importance of the charity work these women do for our community." Emma's mind raced. This was an opportunity she had dreamed about for 3 years, a chance to perform on the Steinway piano she had admired from afar during her secret morning practice sessions. But it was also a trap. Charlotte had no idea about Emma's musical abilities, and performing at the auction would reveal that the receptionist she dismissed as insignificant possessed talents that surpassed her own amateur efforts. "I'm honored by the opportunity, Mr. Westbrook," Emma said slowly. "But I want to make sure I understand the expectations. What type of performance are you envisioning?" "Nothing too elaborate," Harrison waved his hand dismissively. "Background music during the cocktail hour. Perhaps a few featured pieces during dinner. Classical repertoire, something elegant that will impress the donors without overwhelming the conversation. Charlotte mentioned that she's looking for someone who understands their place and won't get carried away with artistic pretensions." The phrase stung, knowing it came from Charlotte's earlier conversation in the lobby. Emma was being offered a chance to perform, but only if she agreed to diminish herself, to provide musical wallpaper for people who saw art as decoration rather than expression. Would Mrs. Westbrook be involved in selecting the repertoire? Emma asked. Oh yes, Harrison nodded. Charlotte has very specific ideas about what's appropriate for these events. She'll want to approve the program in advance. I'm sure the two of you can work together to create something suitable. Emma imagined Charlotte's reaction when she discovered that the invisible receptionist possessed the musical skills she had been seeking. Would Charlotte be gracious enough to acknowledge Emma's abilities, or would she find ways to minimize and control the performance to maintain her own sense of superiority? When would you need an answer? Emma asked. Well, the event is next Friday, so we don't have much time for preparation, Harrison said. I'd like to confirm the musical arrangements by tomorrow morning so Charlotte can finalize the program with her committee. Emma nodded, her mind still spinning with the implications of this opportunity. May I have until tomorrow morning to consider the details and prepare a response? Of course. Harrison stood up, signaling the end of their meeting. I hope you'll say yes, Emma. This could be a wonderful opportunity for you to share your talents with people who appreciate culture and excellence. As Emma walked back to the elevator, she wondered if Harrison truly believed Charlotte and her committee appreciated culture, or if he was simply trying to solve a problem for his wife in the most convenient way possible. Either way, she had been presented with a chance to step out of her invisible role as receptionist and claim recognition for the skills she had spent years developing. The question was whether she was brave enough to take it, knowing that doing so would forever change how Charlotte Westbrook saw her, and potentially how she saw herself. Emma spent that evening in her cramped studio apartment, staring at the acceptance email she had drafted and deleted 17 times. Each version felt either too eager or too hesitant, too professional or too personal. The opportunity Harrison had offered represented everything she had worked toward, yet accepting it meant stepping into Charlotte's world where her musical abilities would be scrutinized and judged by someone who viewed artists as hired entertainment. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Maya, a violinist who played with the City Symphony when budget allowed for full orchestrations. Coffee tomorrow. I need to vent about another wedding gig where the bride wanted me to play Taylor Swift on violin. Emma smiled despite her anxiety. Maya understood the compromise that came with being a professional musician in a world that often reduced classical training to background noise for other people's important moments. The text reminded Emma that she wasn't alone in navigating the tension between artistic integrity and financial necessity. She opened her laptop one more time and typed a simple response to Harrison's request. Mr. Westbrook, I would be honored to perform at the charity auction. Please let me know when Mrs. Westbrook would like to discuss the musical program. Best regards, Emma Chen. Before she could reconsider, Emma hit send and closed her laptop. Whatever happened next, she had committed to stepping out of the shadows and claiming space for her abilities. The next morning arrived with October's crisp bite in the air. Emma arrived at Meridian Financial at her usual early hour, but instead of heading to the 32nd floor conference room, she went straight to her reception desk. Her secret piano practice felt different now that she would soon be performing openly on the same instrument she had been borrowing without permission. At precisely 9 o'clock, Charlotte emerged from the elevator wearing a burgundy wool dress that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent. Her expression carried the satisfaction of someone whose problems were being solved by other people's efforts. I understand you've agreed to provide music for our auction, Charlotte announced without preamble, approaching Emma's desk with the confidence of someone accustomed to immediate attention. Yes, Mrs. Westbrook. I'm very excited about the opportunity, Emma replied, maintaining her professional tone despite the flutter of nerves in her chest. Charlotte's eyebrows lifted slightly, as if surprised that the receptionist possessed enough personality to feel excitement about anything. Well, I hope you understand that this is a sophisticated event with very particular expectations. Our guests include some of the city's most influential philanthropists and business leaders. The music needs to be elegant and appropriate, Nothing experimental or overly dramatic. Of course, Emma nodded. What type of repertoire were you envisioning? Classical pieces that people actually recognize, Charlotte said firmly. Mozart, Chopin, perhaps some light Bach. Nothing too complex or lengthy that would distract from conversation during the cocktail hour. And definitely nothing modern or avant-garde. These are people who appreciate traditional beauty, not artistic statements. Emma felt a familiar sting at the casual dismissal of contemporary classical music, but she pushed it aside. I can certainly prepare a program of classical favorites. Would you like me to submit a list for your approval? That would be wise, Charlotte agreed. I'll also need to hear you play beforehand to ensure you're capable of handling a piano of that caliber. Not everyone who claims to play piano can actually perform at a professional level. The condescension in Charlotte's voice was unmistakable, but Emma maintained her composure. When would be convenient for an audition? Charlotte checked her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be a packed schedule of lunches and shopping appointments. This afternoon at 3 o'clock. We can use the conference room where you'll be performing. That will give me a chance to assess both your playing and your stage presence. Emma's heart began beating faster. In a few hours she would sit at the Steinway piano she had admired from afar and reveal abilities that Charlotte couldn't possibly expect from a receptionist. The moment would reshape their entire dynamic, assuming Emma could overcome her nerves and perform at the level her training had prepared her for. I'll be ready, Emma said simply. Charlotte studied her for a moment, perhaps detecting something in Emma's tone that suggested confidence rather than anxiety. Good. And Emma, please dress appropriately for the audition. I need to see how you'll present yourself at the actual event. Our guests expect a certain level of sophistication from all participants. The implication that Emma might not naturally understand how to dress for a formal event hung in the air between them. Charlotte's assumption that she would need guidance on appropriate attire revealed her complete ignorance of Emma's background and training. Professional musicians understood presentation as much as performance. I understand, Emma replied, choosing not to mention that she had performed in concert halls where dress codes were far more stringent than any charity auction. Charlotte nodded briskly and headed toward the elevator, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that her comfortable anonymity was about to disappear forever. By tomorrow evening she would either be recognized as a talented musician who had been hiding in plain sight, or dismissed as a receptionist who had overestimated her abilities. The morning passed slowly as Emma handled routine calls and visitor check-ins while mentally reviewing the pieces she might perform for Charlotte's audition. Her classical training included dozens of suitable works, but choosing the right repertoire meant balancing technical demonstration with Charlotte's expressed preference for familiar melodies. At lunch break, Emma drove to her storage unit across town where her grandmother's piano bench sat covered with a dust sheet next to boxes of sheet music and concert programs from her conservatory days. She hadn't visited this space in months, finding it too painful to confront the remnants of dreams that felt increasingly distant. Opening the piano bench, Emma found her grandmother's collection of Chopin nocturnes, the pages yellowed with age and marked with penciled fingerings in her grandmother's careful handwriting. These pieces had been among the first sophisticated works Emma had learned, and playing them always felt like connecting with her grandmother's spirit across the years. She selected the Nocturne in E-flat major OPA 9 No. 2, a piece beautiful enough to satisfy Charlotte's requirements while technically demanding enough to demonstrate genuine skill. The melody was recognizable to most classical music listeners, but the ornamentations and dynamic contrasts required careful interpretation and advanced technique. For a second piece, Emma chose Chopin's Waltz in D-flat major OPA 64 No. 1, known as the Minute Waltz, though it actually took closer to 2 minutes to perform properly. The piece was familiar to audiences, while showcasing the rapid passage work and delicate touch that separated trained pianists from amateur players. Driving back to Meridian Financial, Emma felt her grandmother's presence in the passenger seat, offering silent encouragement for the challenge ahead. Her grandmother had immigrated to America with dreams of performing in concert halls, but family obligations and financial pressures had redirected her talents toward teaching and raising children. She had always urged Emma to pursue the opportunities she herself had been forced to abandon. Emma arrived back at the office 30 minutes before her audition, giving her time to change from her receptionist attire into the black dress and low heels she kept in her desk drawer for unexpected meetings. The transformation felt symbolic, shedding the invisible uniform of her daytime role for clothing that honored the seriousness of musical performance. At exactly 3 o'clock, Emma took the elevator to the 32nd floor, carrying the sheet music that would reveal her true capabilities to someone who had never bothered to see her as anything more than office furniture. The conference room looked different in afternoon light, with shadows stretching across the polished table and the Steinway piano gleaming like a dark jewel in the corner. Charlotte was already seated at the far end of the conference table, her laptop open and her phone positioned to record the audition. She had changed into a navy blue blazer that emphasized her authority while maintaining the casual elegance that money could buy. Punctual, Charlotte observed approvingly. "That's important for events like ours. Now I hope you've chosen appropriate pieces for today's audition. Remember, I need to assess whether you can handle the pressure of performing for a sophisticated audience." Emma nodded and walked to the piano, adjusting the bench to accommodate her height and hand position. The familiar weight of the keys beneath her fingers felt like coming home after a long journey. She had played this piano dozens of times during her secret morning sessions, but never with someone watching, never with her identity and abilities on display. "I've prepared 2 pieces for you today," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Both are classical works that should be familiar to your auction guests." "Excellent." Charlotte settled back in her chair with the expression of someone prepared to tolerate mediocrity while hoping for competence. "Please proceed." Emma placed her hands on the keys and began the opening measures of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The melody emerged soft and contemplative, each note shaped with the precise touch control that years of training had developed. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with fluid grace, executing the ornamental passages that transformed simple melody into sophisticated musical expression. Within the first 30 seconds, Emma noticed Charlotte's posture change. The casual confidence that had characterized her demeanor since entering the room gave way to focused attention, then growing surprise, and finally something approaching shock. As Emma progressed through the Nocturne's middle section, where the left hand carries a more complex accompaniment, while the right hand weaves increasingly elaborate variations on the main theme, Charlotte's expression shifted from surprise to disbelief. This wasn't the competent amateur playing she had expected from a receptionist. This was professional-level performance that demonstrated years of serious study and natural musical ability. Emma finished the Nocturne with the delicate closing passage that fades into silence like a whispered secret. The conference room remained quiet for several seconds as Charlotte processed what she had just witnessed. "That was," Charlotte began, then stopped, apparently struggling to find appropriate words. "That was quite accomplished." Emma inclined her head in acknowledgement, but said nothing, allowing Charlotte to absorb the implications of what she had heard. "Please continue with your second piece," Charlotte requested, her voice noticeably different from the patronizing tone she had used earlier. Emma launched into the minute waltz, her fingers dancing across the keys with the lightness and precision that Chopin's writing demanded. The rapid passages that challenged even advanced pianists flowed from her hands like water, each note clear and perfectly timed despite the breakneck tempo. Charlotte leaned forward in her chair, watching Emma's hands with fascination. The technical demands of the waltz were obvious even to someone with limited musical training, and Charlotte was beginning to realize that she had drastically underestimated the abilities of the woman she had dismissed as merely a receptionist. When Emma reached the waltz's dramatic middle section, where the left hand carries a singing melody, while the right hand provides delicate accompaniment, Charlotte's phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the conference table. She had completely forgotten about recording the audition, too absorbed in watching a performance that exceeded anything she had hoped to find for her charity auction. Emma concluded the waltz with a flourish that demonstrated both technical mastery and musical understanding. The final chords resonated through the conference room before fading into silence that felt charged with possibility. Charlotte sat motionless for nearly a minute, staring at Emma as if seeing her for the first time. The confident authority that usually characterized her interactions had been replaced by something Emma had never witnessed before: genuine uncertainty. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Charlotte asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Whitmore Conservatory." Emma replied simply, "I studied there for 4 years before beginning my professional career." "Professional career?" Charlotte repeated slowly. "You mean you've performed professionally before taking this receptionist position?" Emma nodded. "I performed with several chamber groups and gave solo recitals before the economic downturn affected arts funding. This position provided stability while I continued seeking musical opportunities." Charlotte's face cycled through several emotions: confusion, embarrassment, and what might have been the beginning of respect. "Why didn't you mention your musical background when you started working here?" "It wasn't relevant to my job duties," Emma said diplomatically. "And most people assume that professional musicians who take other work have failed at their artistic careers. I prefer to let my current performance speak for itself." The comment hung in the air between them, a gentle reminder that Charlotte herself had made exactly those assumptions. Emma watched as Charlotte struggled to reconcile her image of the invisible receptionist with the accomplished musician who had just performed 2 challenging pieces with professional skill. "This changes everything," Charlotte said finally. "The caliber of performance you just demonstrated is exactly what our auction needs. Perhaps even more sophisticated than I had originally envisioned." Emma felt a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. Charlotte's recognition was gratifying, but it came with new pressures and expectations that might prove more challenging than anonymous competence. "What modifications would you like to make to the program?" Emma asked. Charlotte stood and walked to the piano, running her fingers along its polished surface as if seeing it with new eyes. "I think we can be more ambitious with the repertoire. Your technical abilities obviously exceed what I had planned for. What other pieces could you perform that would really showcase both your skills and the piano's capabilities?" Emma considered the question carefully. Charlotte's enthusiasm for a more sophisticated program was encouraging, but Emma suspected that her motivation had more to do with impressing her committee members than with genuine appreciation for musical artistry. "I could include some Liszt or Rachmaninoff if you'd like pieces that demonstrate the piano's full dynamic range," Emma suggested, "or perhaps some Debussy for something more impressionistic and atmospheric." "Liszt," Charlotte said decisively. "Yes, that sounds appropriately impressive. Something that will make our guests realize they're witnessing exceptional talent." Emma nodded, though she detected in Charlotte's response the same attitude that had troubled her from the beginning: the view of musical performance as a tool for social impression rather than artistic communication. Charlotte was pleased to have discovered Emma's abilities, but primarily because they enhanced her own status as the organizer who had secured exceptional entertainment. "I'll prepare a more ambitious program for your review," Emma offered. "Excellent." Charlotte returned to her seat and picked up her phone, apparently remembering that she had intended to record the audition. "I should mention this development to Harrison. He'll be pleased to know that our musical arrangements have exceeded expectations." Emma gathered her sheet music while Charlotte made notes on her laptop. The dynamic between them had shifted dramatically in the space of 10 minutes, but Emma wasn't entirely sure the change represented genuine progress. Charlotte now recognized her abilities, but Emma sensed that recognition came with its own form of objectification. "There is one other matter we should discuss," Charlotte said without looking up from her laptop. "Compensation for your performance. Obviously, your level of skill commands appropriate payment beyond your regular salary." Emma hadn't considered the financial aspect of the arrangement, having been focused primarily on the opportunity to perform. What did you have in mind? I was thinking $500 for the evening, Charlotte said. That's quite generous for a few hours of background music, even accounting for your obvious talent. The amount was indeed generous by the standards of most wedding and corporate gigs, but Emma noticed how Charlotte still characterized her performance as background music, despite having just witnessed demonstration of concert-level abilities. The mental framework that reduced professional musicians to hired entertainment remained unchanged. That sounds fair, Emma agreed, deciding not to point out that solo recitalists typically earn several times that amount for performances of similar duration and complexity. Charlotte closed her laptop with an expression of satisfaction. Wonderful, I think this arrangement will work out beautifully for everyone involved. I'll send you the final details about timing and logistics by email tomorrow. As Emma rode the elevator back down to the lobby, she reflected on what had just transpired. She had achieved her goal of demonstrating her musical abilities to Charlotte, but the victory felt complicated by the realization that Charlotte's recognition came with its own limitations and assumptions. The remainder of the afternoon passed quickly as Emma returned to her usual receptionist duties, though she noticed several colleagues glancing at her with curious expressions. Word had apparently spread through the office that the quiet woman at the front desk possessed unexpected talents. At 5 o'clock, Emma gathered her belongings and prepared to leave for the day. As she waited for the elevator, Harrison Westbrook emerged from the executive suite, his expression brightening when he saw her. "Emma, Charlotte told me about your audition this afternoon," he said, approaching with the kind of smile usually reserved for valued clients. "Apparently we've been harboring a genuine artist in our midst. I hope Mrs. Westbrook was satisfied with the audition," Emma replied diplomatically. "Satisfied would be an understatement," Harrison chuckled. "She's already calling committee members to boast about the exceptional entertainment she's secured for the auction. I think you've made quite an impression." Emma felt a familiar discomfort with being described as entertainment rather than as a musician performing artistic works, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm looking forward to the performance." "As are we all," Harrison said warmly. "Charlotte mentioned that you studied at Whitmore Conservatory. That's quite prestigious. I'm curious why you never mentioned your musical background during your employment here." The question was posed casually, but Emma detected genuine interest rather than criticism in Harrison's tone. Unlike his wife, he seemed capable of understanding that people might have complex reasons for compartmentalizing different aspects of their lives. "Music is a competitive field with limited opportunities," Emma said carefully. "I've found that maintaining some separation between my artistic pursuits and my professional responsibilities helps both areas function more effectively." Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "I imagine the music world can be quite demanding. Well, I hope Friday's performance represents a positive step forward for both aspects of your career." As Emma drove home that evening, she reflected on Harrison's comment about positive steps forward. The charity auction represented an opportunity to perform publicly for the first time in over a year, but it also marked the end of her comfortable anonymity at Meridian Financial. Starting Monday morning, she would return to her reception desk as someone whose hidden depths had been revealed. She wondered whether that revelation would enhance her position at the company or simply add another layer of complexity to relationships that had been simple when everyone underestimated her capabilities. Charlotte's recognition of her musical abilities was gratifying, but it came with expectations and pressures that her invisible competence had never carried. Emma spent that evening practicing the pieces she would perform at the auction, using the electronic keyboard in her apartment that served as a poor substitute for the Steinway she would play on Friday. Her fingers moved across the keys with muscle memory developed through thousands of hours of practice, but her mind remained focused on the challenge of performing for an audience that viewed her primarily as hired entertainment. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Charlotte sent detailed emails about timing, dress requirements and logistical arrangements that revealed her meticulous attention to details that enhanced her own reputation as an event organizer. Emma was expected to arrive 2 hours before the guests to test the piano and coordinate with the catering staff about placement and timing. Thursday evening, Emma received a phone call from Maya, who had heard through their mutual friends in the classical music community that Emma was performing at a high-profile charity event. "I can't believe you've been hiding a gig like this," Maya said excitedly. "Do you know how many musicians would kill for a chance to perform for that crowd? These are the people who fund symphony orchestras and opera companies." Emma felt a stab of guilt at her friend's enthusiasm. Maya had been struggling to find consistent work for months, taking whatever gigs she could find to pay her rent and maintain her health insurance. The opportunity Emma had been offered was exactly the kind of exposure that could lead to more substantial musical work. "It's complicated," Emma said. "This isn't really a traditional musical engagement. It's more about solving a problem for my employer than showcasing artistic abilities. Who cares about their motivation?" Maya laughed. "If you perform well, those audience members will remember your name and recommend you for other events. This could be the break you've been waiting for." After ending the call, Emma sat in her apartment wondering whether Maya was right about the potential opportunities that might arise from Friday's performance. She had been so focused on the immediate challenge of revealing her abilities to Charlotte that she hadn't considered the broader implications of performing for an audience of wealthy philanthropists and business leaders. Perhaps this was indeed the break she had been waiting for, the chance to step back into the musical world she had been forced to leave behind. Or perhaps it was simply a well-paid gig that would end with polite applause and immediate return to her invisible role as a receptionist. Friday morning arrived grey and drizzly, with October's chills settling into Emma's bones as she dressed for what might prove to be the most important performance of her career. She chose her best black dress and low heels, adding the pearl necklace her grandmother had given her for her conservatory graduation. Looking in the mirror, she saw a professional musician preparing for a significant engagement, rather than a receptionist playing dress-up for her employer's charity event. The day ahead would determine whether Emma's musical abilities could earn her recognition in a world that had largely forgotten she existed as an artist. More importantly, it would test whether she could maintain her integrity while performing for an audience that viewed her primarily as sophisticated background entertainment. As Emma gathered her sheet music and headed for the door, she felt her grandmother's spirit offering encouragement for the challenge ahead. Tonight she would play the Steinway piano she had admired from afar and claim recognition for abilities she had been forced to keep hidden. Whatever happened next, she would finally stop being invisible. The ballroom at the Metropolitan Hotel buzzed with conversations that carried the weight of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with white linens and silver centerpieces, while waiters in black tie moved silently between guests offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Emma arrived through the service entrance as instructed, carrying her sheet music in a leather portfolio that had belonged to her grandmother. Charlotte stood near the auction display tables, directing staff with the precision of a military commander. She wore an emerald green gown that probably cost more than Emma earned in 6 months, her diamond jewelry catching the light with every gesture. When she spotted Emma, her expression shifted to the carefully controlled smile she reserved for service providers who exceeded expectations. "Emma, excellent timing," Charlotte said, approaching with the confidence of someone whose event was proceeding exactly as planned. "The piano has been tuned this afternoon, and we've positioned it to create an intimate atmosphere for your performance. I trust you're prepared for this evening's repertoire." Emma nodded, noting how Charlotte's tone had evolved from the patronizing dismissal of their first interactions to something approaching professional respect. The change was gratifying, though Emma recognized it stemmed more from Charlotte's desire to impress her guests than from genuine appreciation of musical artistry. "I've prepared the program we discussed," Emma replied. "Should I begin with background music during the cocktail reception, then transition to featured performances during dinner?" "Precisely," Charlotte confirmed. "Start with something elegant but not attention-grabbing while people are mingling. Save the more dramatic pieces for when they're seated and can properly appreciate your abilities." Emma walked to the piano, a magnificent concert grand that dominated one corner of the ballroom. The instrument's presence commanded respect even from guests who knew little about music, its polished ebony surface reflecting the room's elegant lighting. Emma adjusted the bench and tested the touch, finding the action responsive and the tone warm despite the room's challenging acoustics. As guests began arriving for the cocktail hour, Emma launched into a gentle arrangement of Debussy's Clair de Lune, allowing the familiar melody to weave through conversations without demanding attention. Her fingers moved across the keys with practiced ease, decades of training, allowing her to monitor the room's energy while maintaining musical focus. The guest list represented the pinnacle of the city's social and business hierarchy. Emma recognized several faces from newspaper society pages and business journals, though she doubted any of them would recognize her outside her role as background entertainment. These were people accustomed to having their desires anticipated and fulfilled by others, including the soundtrack to their philanthropic activities. Margaret Whitfield, the brunette woman with expensive pearls whom Emma had observed during Charlotte's committee meeting, approached the piano during a lull in conversation. Her expression carried the pleased surprise of someone discovering unexpected quality in hired entertainment. "You play beautifully," Margaret said, her voice carrying the cultured tones of private schools and finishing classes. Charlotte mentioned that she had secured exceptional musical accompaniment, but I hadn't expected such sophisticated interpretation. "Where did you study?" "Whitmore Conservatory," Emma replied, continuing to play while acknowledging the compliment with a slight smile. Margaret's eyebrows lifted appreciatively. "Whitmore has an excellent reputation. You must be quite accomplished to have trained there. Are you performing professionally here in the city?" The question touched on the complicated reality of Emma's situation. She was performing professionally at this very moment, but her primary employment remained the receptionist position that none of these guests would consider worthy of their attention. "I take musical engagements when opportunities arise," Emma said diplomatically, transitioning into a Mozart sonata that required minimal vocal response. Margaret nodded and moved away, apparently satisfied with the exchange, but also clearly categorizing Emma as hired talent rather than someone worthy of extended conversation. Emma had become accustomed to this dynamic during her years of wedding and corporate gigs, though it never stopped stinging slightly. As the cocktail hour progressed, Emma noticed Charlotte circulating among her guests with obvious pride in the evening's arrangements. She overheard fragments of conversations where Charlotte accepted compliments on the musical selection with the satisfaction of someone who had made excellent choices about hired services. "The pianist is quite talented," one gentleman was saying to Charlotte near the piano. "Very sophisticated repertoire, much better than the usual hotel entertainment." "I take great care in selecting artists for our events," Charlotte replied smoothly. "It's important that every detail reflects the quality our guests deserve." Emma continued playing while observing how Charlotte accepted credit for her performance without acknowledging that the selection had been largely accidental. Charlotte had stumbled upon Emma's abilities rather than actively seeking exceptional talent, but she now presented the musical arrangements as evidence of her own discerning taste. When dinner service began, Emma transitioned to more substantial pieces that could command attention while remaining appropriate for conversation. She began with Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, a work that balanced technical complexity with emotional accessibility. The opening melody silenced several nearby conversations as guests recognized they were hearing something special. Harrison Westbrook appeared at the piano during the Nocturne's dramatic middle section, his expression showing genuine appreciation for the musical artistry rather than mere satisfaction with hired entertainment. Unlike his wife, Harrison seemed to understand the difference between background music and artistic performance. "Emma, this is extraordinary," he said quietly during a pause between pieces. "I had no idea when I suggested this arrangement that we would be treated to such exceptional musicianship. Charlotte mentioned your conservatory training, but hearing you perform in this setting really demonstrates your abilities." Emma felt a warm flush of recognition from someone who appeared to value her performance on its own merits rather than as reflection of his social choices. "Thank you, Mr. Westbrook. It's a pleasure to perform on such a beautiful instrument for an appreciative audience. Please call me Harrison," he said with a smile. "I suspect this evening may mark the beginning of some interesting opportunities for you. Several of our guests have been asking about your availability for other events." The comment sparked a flutter of excitement in Emma's chest. Perhaps Maya had been right about the potential for this performance to open doors that had been closed since the economic downturn affected arts funding. Professional referrals from satisfied audience members could lead to the kind of consistent musical work she had been seeking. As Harrison rejoined his table, Emma launched into Liszt's Liebestrom No. 3, a piece that showcased both the piano's capabilities and her own technical mastery. The opening theme emerged with singing beauty, each note shaped with the precise touch control that separated professional performance from amateur playing. The Liszt piece commanded attention throughout the ballroom, conversations quieting as guests recognized they were witnessing something exceptional. Emma felt the familiar rush of connecting with an audience through music, the satisfaction of sharing artistic beauty that transcended social boundaries and economic differences. During the piece's climactic passages where rapid arpeggios cascade beneath a soaring melody line, Emma noticed Charlotte standing motionless near her table, watching with an expression Emma had never seen before. It might have been wonder, or perhaps the uncomfortable realization that she had drastically underestimated someone she had dismissed as insignificant. When Emma concluded the Liszt with its gentle fading finale, the ballroom erupted in sustained applause that felt different from polite appreciation for background entertainment. These guests were responding to artistry that had momentarily transported them beyond their familiar world of business transactions and social obligations. Charlotte approached the piano as the applause died down, her expression complex and difficult to read. "That was quite remarkable," she said, her voice carrying emotions Emma couldn't fully identify. "I think it's time we properly introduced you to our guests." Emma felt a surge of anxiety mixed with anticipation. Until this moment she had been anonymous talent providing sophisticated background to other people's evening. Charlotte's suggestion of a formal introduction would shift her status from hired entertainment to recognized artist, a transition that could prove either liberating or uncomfortable. Charlotte moved to the small stage where auction items were displayed, accepting a microphone from the event coordinator. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charlotte began, her voice carrying the polished confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention, "I hope you've been enjoying the exceptional musical accompaniment this evening. I'd like you to meet Emma Chen, our featured pianist, who has been providing such beautiful performances." Applause filled the ballroom as Emma stood and acknowledged the recognition with a gracious bow. She felt exposed under the collective gaze of 200 wealthy strangers, but also exhilarated by the opportunity to claim space as an artist rather than invisible service provider. "Chen is a graduate of the prestigious Whitmore Conservatory," Charlotte continued, "and her performance tonight demonstrates the level of artistic excellence we strive to include in all our charitable endeavors. Emma, would you be willing to share something about your musical background with our guests?" The invitation to speak rather than simply perform marked another shift in Emma's status for the evening. Charlotte was treating her as a person worthy of attention rather than anonymous talent, though Emma suspected this recognition served Charlotte's own interests in appearing culturally sophisticated. Emma stepped closer to the microphone, drawing on years of experience introducing pieces during solo recitals. "Thank you for such a warm reception," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's sound system. "It's been a privilege to perform for such an appreciative audience on this magnificent piano." She paused, considering how much of her story to share with strangers who knew her only as hired entertainment. Music has the power to bridge differences and create connections between people who might otherwise never meet. Tonight I hope these pieces have added beauty to your generous support of charitable causes that make our community stronger. The response was immediate and enthusiastic, with several guests rising for a standing ovation that felt genuinely appreciative rather than merely polite. Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the recognition, remembering her grandmother's encouragement to pursue opportunities for sharing musical beauty with others. As guests returned to their conversations and the auction preparations continued, Emma found herself surrounded by people eager to discuss her performance and ask about future availability. Business cards appeared from event planners, symphony board members, and private music lesson coordinators who recognized exceptional talent when they heard it. "My daughter is planning her wedding next spring," one elegantly dressed woman was saying. "We've been looking for a pianist who could provide ceremony music with real artistic merit. Would you be interested in discussing the engagement?" Another gentleman approached with questions about performing for corporate events where sophisticated entertainment would impress international clients. "We host quarterly receptions for business partners from Europe and Asia. They appreciate cultural refinement, and your performance tonight demonstrates exactly the level of quality we seek." Emma collected business cards and made notes about potential engagements, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden abundance of opportunities after years of struggling to find consistent musical work. Maya had been absolutely right about the networking potential of performing for influential audience members.
Charlotte observed these interactions from a distance, her expression cycling through emotions Emma couldn't fully interpret. There was satisfaction at the evening's success, but also something that might have been discomfort at seeing Emma receive direct recognition that bypassed Charlotte's role as event organizer. As the formal auction began, Emma returned to providing background music, choosing pieces that complemented rather than competed with the auctioneer's presentations. She watched Charlotte take the stage to introduce various auction items, accepting praise for organizational excellence while basking in reflected glory from the evening's musical highlights. The auction raised substantial funds for childhood literacy programs, with several guests mentioning during their bidding that the exceptional entertainment had enhanced their appreciation for the entire event. Emma felt proud to have contributed to charitable success, even if her role remained secondary to the financial donations. Near the evening's end, as guests began making their departures, Margaret Whitfield approached the piano with a proposition that surprised Emma with its directness. "I chair the programming committee for the City Symphony's fundraising events," Margaret said without preamble. "We're always seeking talented soloists who can attract audiences while demonstrating artistic excellence. Would you be interested in auditioning for our spring gala performance?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. Symphony gala performances represented exactly the kind of prestigious engagement she had dreamed about during her conservatory years. "I would be very interested in that opportunity," she replied, trying to keep excitement from overwhelming her professional composure. "Excellent." Margaret smiled with genuine warmth. "I'll contact you next week with audition details." Tonight's performance demonstrates that you understand how to balance artistic integrity with audience engagement, which is exactly what our gala requires. As Margaret walked away, Emma felt the evening's significance crystallizing around her. What had begun as an arrangement to solve Charlotte's entertainment problem had evolved into potential entry point back into the professional musical world she had been forced to leave behind. Charlotte appeared beside the piano as Emma packed her sheet music, carrying 2 glasses of champagne and wearing an expression that seemed almost apologetic. "I owe you an apology," Charlotte said quietly, offering one of the glasses to Emma, "and an acknowledgement that I made assumptions about you that were both wrong and unfair." Emma accepted the champagne with surprise, noting that this was the first time Charlotte had ever offered her anything resembling equality in their interactions. "When I first asked you to perform tonight," Charlotte continued, "I thought I was solving a simple problem by finding adequate musical background for our event. I had no idea I was working with someone of your caliber and accomplishments." Emma sipped her champagne while considering how to respond to what felt like a genuine attempt at reconciliation. "Thank you for saying that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to perform tonight, regardless of your initial expectations." Charlotte nodded, though her expression remained troubled.
I'm realizing that I've spent 3 years working in the same building as someone with extraordinary talents, and I never bothered to see beyond my own assumptions about who you were." The admission hung between them, acknowledging years of casual dismissal and indifference that had rendered Emma invisible despite their daily proximity. Emma felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness at Charlotte's recognition of what had been lost through willful blindness. "People often see what they expect to see," Emma said diplomatically. "Tonight gave you a chance to see something different." Charlotte laughed softly, though the sound carried more rue than humor. "Indeed it did. I suspect Monday morning will feel quite different when I see you at the reception desk, knowing what I know now about your abilities." Emma wondered whether Charlotte's recognition would translate into lasting change in their professional relationship, or if the magic of tonight's performance would fade back into routine indifference once the glamour of the charity auction became a memory. "I hope we can find ways to acknowledge people's full humanity," Emma said carefully. "Not just during special occasions, but in our everyday interactions." Charlotte met her eyes directly for perhaps the first time in 3 years of working in the same building. "That's a worthy goal," she said simply. "And one I clearly need to work on." As Emma gathered her belongings and prepared to leave through the service entrance she had used to arrive, Harrison approached with an envelope that contained her performance fee plus what appeared to be a substantial bonus. "Emma, thank you for an extraordinary evening," he said warmly. "I suspect this performance has created opportunities that extend well beyond tonight's event." Emma thanked him and walked toward the exit, pausing to look back at the ballroom where she had reclaimed her identity as a musician after years of hiding behind professional anonymity. The evening had exceeded every expectation, providing not just recognition for her abilities but potential pathways back into the musical career she had been forced to abandon. The following Monday morning, Emma arrived at Meridian Financial at her usual early hour, but instead of practicing piano in secret, she went directly to her reception desk. The building felt different now that her hidden talents had been revealed, though she wasn't certain whether that difference represented progress or merely a new form of complexity. Charlotte emerged from the elevator at her customary time, approaching the reception desk with an expression Emma had never seen before. It might have been respect, or perhaps uncertainty about how their relationship should function now that Emma's capabilities had been acknowledged. "Good morning, Emma," Charlotte said, her tone carefully neutral. "I trust you had a pleasant weekend after Friday's performance." "Very pleasant, thank you," Emma replied, noting how Charlotte now used her name rather than generic references to the receptionist or the girl at the front desk. "I've been thinking about our conversation Friday evening," Charlotte continued, "about seeing people's full humanity in everyday interactions. I wonder if you might be interested in discussing ways to incorporate more music into our corporate events and client receptions." Emma felt a flutter of possibility at the suggestion. If Charlotte was genuinely interested in creating opportunities for musical performance within Meridian Financial's corporate culture, it could represent exactly the kind of steady, dignified work Emma had been seeking. "I'd be very interested in exploring those possibilities," Emma said. Charlotte smiled, and for the first time since Emma had known her, the expression seemed completely genuine rather than calculated for effect. "Excellent. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting to discuss specifics. As colleagues with complementary expertise rather than employer and employee." As Charlotte headed toward the elevator, Emma reflected on the remarkable transformation that had occurred over the weekend. Friday evening's performance had not only revealed her hidden talents to an audience of influential strangers, but had also forced Charlotte to confront her own assumptions about the people she encountered daily. The phone rang, interrupting Emma's thoughts with its familiar demand for professional attention. "Good morning, Meridian Financial. This is Emma speaking. How may I help you?" But even as she returned to her familiar reception duties, Emma knew that nothing would ever be quite the same. She was no longer invisible, no longer hiding her true capabilities behind professional anonymity. The piano had given her back her voice, and the music had reminded everyone who heard it that extraordinary things can emerge from the most unexpected places when we take time to really listen.
The story of Emma Chen, the receptionist who proved that talent recognizes no social boundaries, became legend within Meridian Financial and eventually throughout the city's cultural community. But Emma herself knew the real lesson wasn't about hidden talent finally being recognized. It was about the courage to claim space for your authentic self, even when the world seems determined to keep you invisible. Years later, when Emma had established herself as one of the city's most sought-after classical pianists, she would still remember the morning she stopped hiding her true self behind professional anonymity. And sometimes, when she performed in the world's finest concert halls, she would think of Charlotte Westbrook, who had learned to see beyond her expectations and discovered that the most beautiful music often comes from the most unexpected sources. 6 months after the charity auction that changed everything, Emma Chen stood in the green room of Symphony Hall, adjusting the sleeve of her emerald concert gown while reviewing the program for her debut solo recital. The venue that had once seemed impossibly distant during her conservatory years now buzzed with anticipation for her performance, sold out thanks to word-of-mouth recommendations from influential audience members who had witnessed her transformation from invisible receptionist to recognized artist. Margaret Whitfield knocked softly on the green room door before entering with a bouquet of white roses and a warm smile that had become familiar over the months of preparation leading to this evening. "Emma, you look absolutely radiant. Are you ready for your moment?" Emma accepted the flowers with gratitude that extended far beyond the gesture itself. Margaret had become more than a symphony board member who had offered performance opportunities. She had evolved into a mentor who understood the complex journey from musical anonymity back to artistic recognition. "As ready as I'll ever be," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the butterflies dancing in her stomach. "Though I still can't quite believe this is happening." Margaret laughed with the genuine warmth that had characterized their developing friendship. "Believe it, my dear. You've earned every moment of tonight's success through years of dedication and exceptional talent. The audience is filled with people who appreciate serious artistry, not just social entertainment." The distinction mattered deeply to Emma, who had spent the intervening months carefully building a reputation based on musical excellence rather than novelty value. The transition from reception desk to concert stage had required navigating delicate perceptions about her motivations and capabilities, proving that her abilities transcended the circumstances of their discovery. Emma's phone buzzed with a text message from Maya, who was performing with the symphony orchestra that evening as part of the ensemble pieces interspersed throughout Emma's solo program. "Break a leg tonight. You've inspired all of us with your courage to reclaim your artistic identity. The whole orchestra is rooting for you." The support from her fellow musicians meant everything to Emma, representing acceptance from peers who understood the challenges of building sustainable careers in classical music. Maya's friendship had proven invaluable during the months of preparation, offering both practical advice about performance logistics and emotional support during moments of self-doubt. Another text arrived from an unexpected source, Charlotte Westbrook, wishing you tremendous success tonight. "Harrison and I will be in the audience, proud to witness your continued artistic journey. Thank you for teaching me to see beyond surface assumptions." Emma smiled at the message, reflecting on how dramatically her relationship with Charlotte had evolved since that transformative Friday evening. Charlotte had kept her promise about incorporating more music into Meridian Financial's corporate culture, creating opportunities for Emma to perform at client receptions and company events that provided both income and professional development. More importantly, Charlotte had undertaken genuine self-reflection about her treatment of service workers and assumptions about people whose circumstances didn't immediately reveal their capabilities. She had become an advocate for arts education funding and had used her social influence to support programs that provided opportunities for talented musicians regardless of their economic backgrounds. The 30-minute warning announcement echoed through Symphony Hall's backstage area, prompting Emma to begin her final preparation ritual. She closed her eyes and visualized her grandmother's hands guiding her through scales and arpeggios during childhood lessons, feeling that beloved presence offering encouragement for the journey that had led to this moment. Emma's program for the evening represented a carefully curated journey through classical repertoire that showcased both technical mastery and emotional depth. She would open with Bach's Italian Concerto, its architectural precision demonstrating the foundation of her musical training while establishing immediate credibility with knowledgeable audience members. The centerpiece would be Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, a work that demanded not only technical excellence but also mature musical interpretation. Emma had chosen this piece because it embodied the emotional complexity of her own journey from hidden talent to recognized artist, its dramatic contrasts mirroring the challenges and triumphs of recent months. She would conclude with Rachmaninoff's Piano Sonata No. 2, a monumentally difficult work that few pianists attempted in solo recital settings. The choice was deliberate, designed to demonstrate that her abilities extended beyond the elegant but accessible repertoire she had performed at corporate events and charity functions. As Emma made her way to the stage entrance, she encountered several colleagues from her conservatory days who had heard about her recital through professional networks. Their presence felt like validation from the artistic community she had been forced to leave behind years earlier, when economic realities made musical careers seem impossibly precarious. "Emma, we're so proud of you for persevering through the difficult years," said David Chen, a fellow pianist who now taught at a prestigious music academy. "Your story has become legendary among our students as an example of why they should never abandon their artistic dreams even when circumstances force temporary compromises." The conversation reminded Emma that her journey resonated beyond personal triumph, representing hope for countless musicians who struggled to balance artistic calling with financial survival. Her success demonstrated that talent could emerge from unexpected circumstances and that persistence could overcome years of professional setbacks. The stage manager appeared beside her, wearing the efficient smile of someone who had guided thousands of performers through pre-concert nerves. "Miss Chen, it's time. The audience is seated and ready for an exceptional evening of music." Emma walked onto the Symphony Hall stage to sustained applause from an audience that represented the culmination of months of networking, relationship building, and careful reputation management. She recognized faces from the charity auction that had launched her return to professional performance, but also saw numerous new supporters who had been drawn by recommendations and reviews of her subsequent performances. The Steinway concert grand piano gleamed under the stage lights, its presence commanding respect from even the most casual classical music listeners. Emma approached the instrument with reverence born from years of longing for opportunities to perform on instruments worthy of serious musical expression. As she settled at the piano bench and adjusted her position, Emma felt the familiar transformation that occurred when she connected with an exceptional instrument. The reception desk at Meridian Financial seemed to belong to another lifetime, replaced by the immediate reality of sharing musical beauty with people who had chosen to spend their evening experiencing live classical performance. Emma launched into Bach's Italian Concerto with the confidence that came from thousands of hours of practice and preparation. The opening movement's crisp articulation and rhythmic precision established her technical credentials while demonstrating the musical intelligence that separated professional performance from mere note reading. The audience's attention focused immediately, recognizing they were witnessing serious artistry rather than social entertainment. Emma felt the familiar joy of communicating through music, using dynamics and phrasing to create emotional landscapes that transcended the limitations of spoken language. During the Bach's reflective slow movement, Emma noticed Charlotte and Harrison Westbrook seated in the orchestra section, their expressions showing genuine appreciation for musical artistry rather than polite attention to hired entertainment. Charlotte's presence felt symbolic of broader changes in how Emma was perceived and how she perceived herself. The Italian Concerto's concluding movement showcased Emma's technical mastery while building toward the evening's more emotionally demanding repertoire. As the final chords resonated through Symphony Hall, the audience erupted in enthusiastic applause that felt like recognition rather than mere appreciation. Emma acknowledged the response with a gracious bow before transitioning into the evening's centerpiece, Chopin's Ballad No. 1. This work required not only technical excellence, but also the kind of mature musical interpretation that could only come from lived experience and emotional understanding. The ballad's opening theme emerged with singing beauty, each phrase shaped by Emma's understanding of longing, struggle, and eventual triumph. She thought of her grandmother's sacrificed dreams, her own years of compromise and hidden talent, and the courage required to reclaim artistic identity after extended absence from professional performance. As the piece progressed through its dramatic development sections, Emma felt the audience following every emotional twist and turn. This was music making at its highest level, where technical mastery served emotional communication rather than existing as an end in itself. The ballad's climactic passages demanded everything Emma had learned about combining power with precision, allowing Chopin's romantic expression to flow through her without overwhelming the delicate balance between passion and control. Years of secret practice sessions in empty conference rooms had prepared her for this moment of public artistic declaration. When Emma reached the ballad's mysterious coda, where the opening theme returns transformed by everything that has come before, she felt tears threatening her composure. The music embodied her own transformation from invisible service worker to recognized artist, proof that authentic expression could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. The final gentle chord faded into silence that stretched for several seconds before exploding into sustained applause and calls of bravo from audience members who recognized they had witnessed something special. Emma stood to acknowledge the response, feeling overwhelmed by the recognition she had dreamed about during years of professional exile. After intermission, Emma returned to tackle Rachmaninoff's monumentally challenging Second Piano Sonata, a work that pushed the boundaries of both technical and emotional expression. This piece represented her artistic statement about refusing to be limited by others' expectations or assumptions about her capabilities. The sonata's opening movement erupted with volcanic energy that demonstrated Emma's complete command of the instrument's dynamic range. Every passage that had seemed impossibly difficult during conservatory years now flowed from her fingers with the authority that came from musical maturity and unwavering determination. During the work's reflective middle movement, Emma thought about all the people who had supported her journey back to professional performance. Maya's friendship and encouragement, Margaret's mentorship and opportunities, even Charlotte's eventual recognition and support had contributed to this moment of artistic fulfillment. The sonata's final movement provided opportunities for Emma to demonstrate every aspect of her musical training, from delicate voicing in complex textures to thunderous climaxes that utilized the full range of keyboard expression. This was music that demanded everything a pianist could offer, and Emma gave it willingly and completely. As the final chords thundered through Symphony Hall, the audience leaped to their feet in unanimous acclaim for a performance that had exceeded every expectation. Emma felt tears of joy and relief streaming down her face as she acknowledged applause that represented validation from the musical community she had fought so hard to rejoin. The standing ovation continued for several minutes, with calls for an encore that Emma had prepared but hardly dared hope she would need. She returned to the piano to offer Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the same piece she had played during her audition for Charlotte months earlier, now transformed by context and confidence into a statement of artistic arrival. Backstage after the performance, Emma was surrounded by well-wishers, critics and fellow musicians offering congratulations and discussing future performance opportunities. The success of tonight's recital had established her as a serious artist worthy of continued attention from the classical music community. Margaret appeared through the crowd with champagne and an expression of maternal pride in Emma's achievement. "My dear, that was absolutely magnificent. I've already received calls from 3 different venues requesting information about booking you for upcoming seasons." Charlotte and Harrison approached through the crowd, both beaming with genuine pleasure at Emma's triumph. "Emma, that was extraordinary," Charlotte said with sincere emotion. "Thank you for showing me that exceptional art can emerge from anywhere when we take time to really see and listen." As the evening wound down and the well-wishers gradually departed, Emma found herself alone in the green room, still wearing her concert gown and holding the roses Margaret had brought hours earlier. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw not the invisible receptionist who had hidden her talents for years, but a professional musician who had reclaimed her artistic identity through courage and perseverance. Her phone rang with a call from a recording company representative who had attended the concert and wanted to discuss possibilities for Emma's debut album. Another call came from a prestigious music festival director, offering a featured performance slot for the following summer season. As Emma finally changed out of her concert attire and prepared to leave Symphony Hall, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from secret morning practice sessions to triumphant public recognition. The path had required compromising her dreams for practical survival, but it had also taught her about resilience, determination, and the courage to reveal authentic talents when opportunities finally arose. Walking out into the cool evening air, Emma felt her grandmother's presence, offering approval for the artistic courage she had finally found within herself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight had proven that talent combined with persistence could overcome years of professional setbacks and social invisibility. The receptionist who had been dismissed and ignored had become a pianist worthy of standing ovations and critical acclaim. But more importantly, Emma Chen had learned to see herself as an artist regardless of external recognition, understanding that authentic expression possessed value independent of audience approval or professional success. The music had always been there, waiting patiently through years of compromise and hidden practice. Now it flowed freely, touching lives and creating beauty that transcended social boundaries and economic circumstances. Emma had found her voice again, and she would never let it be silenced. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.